What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today we are going to be looking at Brothers War spoilers. Now, I know I'm a little late to the party here because it has been multiple days since they came out. I know, as a content creator, I've really dropped the ball here, but I would be remiss if I did not dive into these cards and talk about them, because I think there's some interesting stuff here that I think also telegraphs what we can expect throughout the set that has me really intrigued. And so I want to kind of break some of that down and talk about it with you today. But before we get into the cards themselves, I want to give a huge shout out and a huge thank you to a new sponsor of the channel, magicjank.com. Thank you so much, MagicJank, for supporting this channel and everything that we do. It is a brand new online Magic the Gathering marketplace where you can buy and sell your Magic the Gathering products, whether those are cards, sealed products, or even equipment like binders, sleeves, that kind of thing. It's a great website. I am honored to be a part of it. Thank you so much, MagicJank. Definitely go check them out for all of your janky needs. All right, and with that, let's dive into the cards themselves. So I'm going to start with one that has caused a huge stir with good reason, because they took one of the most iconic characters in all of Magic and created a new card for him. Now, of course, we expected to see Urza in the Brothers War. I mean, the brothers themselves, one of them is Urza. So he is a titular character in the Brothers War. So of course he was going to be here. We haven't seen Mishra yet, but I have no doubt there's going to be a Mishra card, and hopefully it's going to be as interesting in design as Urza is. So we have Urza, Lord Protector, who is a human artificer for 1 white-blue. You get a 2/4 with the text, artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And then you can also pay 7 if you both own and control Urza, Lord Protector, and an artifact named the Mightstone and Weakstone. Exile them, then meld them into Urza Planeswalker. Activate only as a sorcery. Now, you may be wondering, wait a minute, there's a Planeswalker mode on here, although since I'm late to the party, you probably already are familiar with the card. But in any event, we're getting to it. We're going to talk about it. Duck on it. The creature itself, so if we discount that activated ability for now, we will get into it. But if we just look at this creature on its face as a mythic, a 2/4 for 3 in white-blue that gives us a cost reduction on artifacts, instants, and sorceries is fine, frankly. I can see this being useful in like a Azorius control kind of situation, because all of a sudden you can now get mana rocks out earlier, other utility artifacts that maybe you want to leverage. Okay, I think in Commander, this actually could be really solid as a Commander, because that opens up some weird combo potential, and you have the upside of possibly melding it later, which is neat. But on its own, in Standard, I don't expect Urza Lord Protector to make any kind of waves. Maybe some Historic Brawl action, but like I would be shocked if you see this outside of weird janky brews that are trying to take advantage of that activated ability. I think that's really the only time you're going to see this card, honestly. Frankly, like for it being Urza, I'm kind of not impressed. But there's more than meets the eye with this card, which is kind of appropriate because they're just unveiling some Transformer stuff. But in any event, there's more to this card. So let's get into it. So before we look at the card that this melds into, because it does meld again, which is a sweet mechanic, by the way, which is pretty darn cool. We need to take a look at the other half. So in order to meld Urza into Urza Planeswalker, you need to have the Mightstone and Weakstone. This is a legendary artifact power stone for 5 mana that when it enters the battlefield, choose one. You either draw 2 cards, or target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. So that's actually not bad on its own, because we have a situation where it basically kills whatever the biggest creature is on the board most of the time. Not always, but most of the time. Like this can take out Sheoldred. That's pretty sweet. Or it draws you 2 cards. And then it also has the ability to tap, add 2 mana. This mana can't be spent on non-artifact spells. So it's similar to the Power Stones that Karn Living Legacy creates. You can cast artifact spells with it, or you can use the mana to activate abilities. So the mana has some uses, but it is limited. This isn't just a straight Thran Dynamo. This is kind of a bad Thran Dynamo with a good ETB. So to be honest, I think this card has some play if you have ways to spend that mana. Now, the joke here, or kind of the idea is, you can stick Urza 1 turn, potentially as early as turn 3. Urza then gives you a cost reduction on the Mind Stone, so you can then play Mightstone, Weakstone, for 4. And then all of a sudden, the mana that you get from the Mightstone and Weakstone can then be used the following turn to help you pay for the activation on Urza. So, okay, but if you're going to go that line, turn 3 Urza, turn 4 Power Stones, turn 5 Meld, that has, in order for that to work, your opponent has to have no interaction whatsoever, and you need to have both of those cards not quite in your, like, practically in your starting hand. I mean, if you really want to be successful, you will have drawn a couple of cards, but in any event, like, you need them in your top, 10 cards, in order to pull that off. 11 maybe. It's not good. And then this also gets blown out to things like Infernal Grasp or Fading Hope, because what happens is, with Urza Lord Protector, the ability specifically says if you both own and control Urza Lord Protector and an artifact, named Mightstone, Weakstone. If your opponent hits Urza with a Fading Hope in response to that activation, when the ability resolves, it will identify that you no longer own a permanent on the battlefield called Urza Lord Protector, and it'll fizzle. So it won't work. It'll drop, and nothing will happen. And you'll be sitting there with a Mightstone and Weakstone and 7 mana that you can't get back, feeling very sad. I think that's going to happen a lot. Like a lot. So in order to activate that 7, you need to be in a situation where you have like a Tameo Safekeeping or a Spell Pierce at least, or something back to help protect the ability. And you're looking at dumping like 8-9 mana, like having that all available in one turn. So we're looking at like control decks only are interested in this. So, okay, we've identified that this is a crazy situation that requires specific cards and some incredible luck because your opponent needs to not have anything that can interact with it. So what do you get? If you do somehow manage to pull all of this off, jump through all of these flaming hoops and actually get this thing going, you can merge Urza Lord Protector and the Mightstone and Weakstone into Urza Planeswalker. Now, you will notice, actually, it's not super visible on my screen right here. This is actually made up of 2 separate cards. These meld together similarly to Bracella, I believe, the angel from Innistrad, one of the Innistrad blocks. Like the Eldrazi Angel monster, you actually have to take 2 cards and stick them together in order to make Urza Planeswalker. So it's kind of cool because you get this incredibly powerful Planeswalker, and it's going to be physically larger than everything else on the table. I like that. And like Urza, he's freaking Urza. He better be larger than life. That makes sense. I get it. So what is Urza Planeswalker? Now the text on here is kind of tough to read because it is very, very small. But Urza Planeswalker reads, he is a white and blue permanent. Legendary Planeswalker Urza. Once during each of your turns, you may activate an additional loyalty ability of Urza Planeswalker. So you get 2 instead of just 1. And you may activate the same ability twice. Sick. +2. Artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you cast this turn cost 2 less to cast, and you gain 2 life. You can activate that twice, all of a sudden your artifacts cost 4 less. Like, that's just value town. And your instants and sorceries all of a sudden cost 4 less. So if you have big bomb spells, all of a sudden they are flying, and that's nice. You also have +1, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. If you're empty-handed and you need some gas, well, boom, there it is, and it fills your graveyard, if that's relevant for you. Sick. Love it. It also has a 0 ability. Create 2 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens. At the very least, you can just shove 4 soldiers onto the board. You can chump block everything your opponent's throwing at you. This guy is not going anywhere. We also have a -3. Exile target non-land permanent. Boom, get something gone. Love it. -10. This is the ultimate. This is the big one. Artifacts and planeswalkers you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Destroy all non-land permanents. So it's like this ultimate wrath that just straight up doesn't touch your creatures your artifacts or planeswalkers. So if those are relevant types for you, if you have a lot of artifacts and planeswalkers online, they're fine. That's fantastic. Like this planeswalker is possibly the strongest single planeswalker that has ever been printed in the game. That said, you've got to earn it to get to it, like I was saying. So this, to me, reads like a cool, janky build-around, or possibly a control finisher in a very slow meta. But I personally think this is kind of more of a janky build-around, because if you get to this, you're probably going to win the game. But even then, your opponent can have a hero's downfall in response to your first activation, and you don't get that much value for having dumped a ton of mana into it. So Instant speed interaction is going to be the bane of this thing by a lot. It's gonna be pretty rough. But all in all, I gotta say, I'm intrigued at the possibilities and I like the idea. I'm definitely gonna try to make this thing work because you can see the upside is absolutely there. I just think it's gonna be almost impossible to get to. Like, almost impossible. You know, there are a lot of phenomenal, huge creatures. Like, you know, it's funny, when Adventures in the Forgotten Realms came out, the Tarask got a lot of beef for being underwhelming, which is fair, you know, because flavorfully, maybe it could have been bigger, could have been more powerful, at least give the damn thing trample. But at the end of the day, it was a very powerful 10/10 that destroyed a blocker every time it attacked. Like, that was very good, and it practically had hexproof if you cast it from your hand. Like, it was a very good card if you could cast it. You just could almost never cast it, and that's the thing. Omniscience is another example of a phenomenal card that you don't see outside of decks that can cheat it into play early, generally. You know, because it's incredibly difficult to cast. It's just incredibly difficult to get to. Once you get to it, yeah, you're probably going to win the game, but it's incredibly difficult to get to, and I think Urza is the same way. It's going to be incredibly difficult to get to this, and once you have that kind of mana, there are a lot of options that you have at your disposal, a lot of things you could do. This is a pretty good one, to be fair. Like, yeah, this is up there, but it's gonna be tough. It's funny, like, if this Planeswalker is allowed to stick and stay on the board for one turn, the sheer amount of value you're gonna be able to generate off of it is insane. Even one turn after it has been around, because its starting loyalty is 7, you will have an opportunity to ultimate this. So you can play this, or you can meld this one turn, double tick, so +2, gain 4 life, make a bunch of your stuff cheaper. Even if you don't take advantage of that, you're still gaining 4 life, and you're getting Urza's loyalty up to 11. That's already higher than you need for the ultimate. You know, even if you like +2 and +1 it, all of a sudden you have loyalty 10. The next turn you +1 once, draw some additional cards, fill some stuff, and then -10, your opponent's board is just gone, and you have this monster Planeswalker that's going to continue generating you value. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. Like, straight up awesome. But I don't think we're going to see it very often. I'm going to try it. You better believe I'm going to try to do this, but I'm going to try to do this because I'm a jankomancer, you know, and that's my goal. Now, my goal is to create weird janky things that have crazy big upsides. So this is within my wheelhouse, but I don't think it's going to make competitive waves. I'd be happy to be wrong on that, though. All right, next up, moving on down the line, we have Queen Kayla bin-Kroog. I have no idea the story. I'm assuming she's from Zalfir, just based on you know, the sound of the name and her appearance. She is a legendary human noble, 2/3 for 1 red white. Pay 4, tap, discard all the cards in your hand, then draw that many cards. You may choose an artifact or creature card with mana value 1 you discarded this way, then do the same for artifact or creature cards with mana values 2 and 3. Return those cards to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. This looks to me to be fantastic. I love this card. Now, is it going to be like the bomb diggity shiz? Not necessarily, because in reality, you have to give up some level of control to make this work. So you play Queen Kayla out on turn 3. If you have a 1, 2, and 3 drop in your hand, you pay 4, you now get 6 mana worth of stuff on the field and a fresh set of cards in your hand. You wheel yourself and get stuff onto the battlefield. That's just awesome. And I think it's going to be really valuable in any situation where you want to wheel your hand. Now, if you don't get 6 mana worth of stuff, it may make more sense just to cast out your spells, cast out your creatures. But the fact that you're allowed to do artifacts or creatures in any deck that has a lot of cheap things, I mean, this could be just a great way to churn through your deck. The card velocity and card advantage that you get with this is meaningful. I like it. Now, you have to pay 4 to use the ability, so this may be more of a commander card. We may not see this in standard, but the fact that the starting cost is only 3, I'm intrigued at the possibilities. I'm definitely intrigued at the possibilities. I think cards like Spirited Companion as like a 2-drop in this kind of situation, I think they're great because it's a 2-drop that you can then throw onto the battlefield, and it also draws you a card. So if it draws you into another 2-drop, well, then all of a sudden you have it in your hand, locked and loaded for when you activate Kayla. So that's great. Cards that don't replace themselves in your hand is kind of a bummer with this, because all of a sudden, if you play out a 1-drop and a 2-drop, then Kayla, then you go to turn 4, you activate, the chances are you may not have anything in your hand worth dumping. You can also only activate this as a sorcery. So big aggro decks aren't going to be able to like somehow give her vigilance and get additional damage in. And well, you can still do damage and do that post combat, I suppose, but like you're not gonna be able to do it on your opponent's end step after keeping mana up, that kind of thing. Like this is Collected Company, this is not, and that's a little bit of a bummer. The difference between sorcery and instant speed is a big one. So I'm intrigued by the possibilities here. I think it's a little too expensive and a little too clunky to really see a ton of play, because you know, red-white aggressive decks have a lot of cheap creatures at the 1, 2, and 3-drop slots. However, you don't really get much benefit if you're paying for and tapping one of your creatures just to get 2 of them out of the battlefield when you could have just played 2 of them on your hand. You know, you do get to draw some more cards that way, so it might still be worth it in the end. But all the same, there are some extra steps here, and if the situation lines up, it's very valuable. Now, that said, Queen Kayla and Urza both have something that I think we're going to see a lot of in Brothers War, and that is expensive activated abilities. That appears to be a theme, and I'm not super surprised to see that. Now, we've only seen a handful of cards so far. This was just Wizards' first drip of Brothers War, so we have a long way to go as far as, you know, there's a lot of cards we haven't seen yet. But that as a theme makes sense, especially when you think of the Mightstone and Weakstone, or the Power Stones that are generated from Karn Living Legacy. They have this text on them that says the mana cannot be used to cast non-artifact spells. All that mana can be used to activate abilities. And let me tell you what, as somebody who has kind of done some janky stuff with Karn Living Legacy, having huge expensive activated abilities on your side of the board is an awesome way to spend Power Stone mana. It's fantastic. And so if we see more Power Stones or cheap ways to make Power Stones, all of a sudden these activated abilities that cost 4, or in Urza's case 7, all of a sudden won't be that hard to pull off, I think. You know, because if that type of mana ramp continues, then all of a sudden having these big mana sinks that have an opportunity to get you value could be really cool. So if we have a decent statted 1 or 2 drop aggressive creature, all of a sudden, you know, that creates a Power Stone. All of a sudden, you know, that pumping out a Power Stone that you can then use to feed into Kayla. Like, cool, there are some very cool possibilities. Or like a 2-mana Power Stone that draws you a card. Like something like that would fit into this deck potentially very well. So I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued. I like the idea of this card, and I like what it kind of telegraphs as far as the rest of the set is concerned. Very intrigued to see what flavors of artifact style, like control and ramp, we might see in this set. So I'm very intrigued. I like this. I like this a lot. All right, next up, we have Surge Engine. I think this card is awesome. Speaking of activated abilities, you know, speaking of mana sinks on your cards, yeah, I'm not burying the lead. I think this card is great. It is a mythic, and I think it earns it. We're going to see a lot of this card. It is a colorless defender, 3/2 for 2 construct. Now, that, not good. Stat line, not great. Defender is a big bummer. However, you play this on turn 2, potentially, and as early as turn 3, you can pay 1 blue. Surge Engine loses defender and gains this creature can't be blocked. With an additional investment of 1 blue mana, you get a 3/2 unblockable artifact creature. That's awesome. Like right there, if you had a card, maybe it would have to be an uncommon or something, that was 2 and a blue, 3/2 this creature can't be blocked, I'm in. Like, I'm very intrigued by the card. Like, if it was in the mythic slot, okay, maybe that's not great, but like as a rare or as you know, maybe an uncommon if Wizards is feeling saucy, like that card alone is pretty good. And we have that, but even better, because it might as well have haste, because you pay it on 2. You play this on 2. On 3, you pump 1 blue into it. All of a sudden, you can attack with this, and you still have potentially 2 mana up in your mana base for counter spells or bounces or the like. So not only do you have a 3/2 unblockable, but you can also protect it with the stuff in your hand. awesome. Like tempo decks, this thing's the best. But wait, there's more. For 2 and a blue, Surge Engine becomes blue and has base power and is 5/4. Activate only if Surge Engine doesn't have Defender. So this just levels up, so it becomes a 3/2. Once you have 3 mana, you can sink into it. It becomes a 5/4. That alone, your opponent is on a 4-turn clock. Even if they're at 20, this thing's great. I love it. And then, but wait, there is yet more. 4 blue, draw 3 cards. Activate it only if Surge Engine is blue and only once. Now you will note it does not say once each turn. It says once. And so you only get to do this one time for the time that you control Surge Engine. Now, the time that Surge Engine is on the board. If you exchange control, like if your opponent steals it, but you've already activated this, I believe they cannot activate it as well because it's already been used up effectively. That said, if you blink Surge Engine, or if you were to bounce it and recast it, you could use that ability again, but you'd have to go through the other steps first because it would come into play with Defender. So you would then have to pay 1 to strip the Defender, give it the unblockable, then pay another 3 to give it the 5/4, and then pay some more, to activate the last ability. So I gotta say, but all in all, like these level up creatures, I was not high on them at all. When Wizards brought them back in Kaldheim with Ascended Spirit, I remember thinking like, really? This is what we're dealing with right now? We have to keep track of this thing? What? Why? Why is this a thing? And then shortly thereafter, Mono Blue Tempo completely ran me over with it, and I realized, all right, I guess this is pretty good. And Evolved Sleeper so far, even though we've only been able to play with it for a couple weeks now, it's proving to be very similar. It's just really freaking good. And this is another blue tempo version with that kind of play to it. I think this card's great. I think blue tempo decks are going to want this. I think blue control decks are going to want this. I think blue mid-range decks with blue in them are going to want this. Like if you're playing like an Esper Rafine mid-range thing right now, slot this in there. Like I think everybody wants this. This card's great. Like I honestly can't sing the praises of this card highly enough. I think it's fantastic. Yeah, so be on the lookout for this thing. If you see it in draft, just take it. Like it's that simple. You can splash. Well, actually, yeah, you can splash blue for this. Yeah. Anyway, very good. All right, next up, we have Mishra's Foundry. Now this is a land that, as somebody who is not a particularly big fan of creature lands, I am bummed to see this. That said, aggro fans who are so entirely sick of Meat Hook Massacre, rejoice, because now you have an answer, kind of, a little. In our last standard prior to rotation, creature lands were very, very powerful. Adventures in the Forgotten Realms had Den of the Bugbear, Hive of the Eye Tyrant, Hall of Storm Giant, etc., etc. So not to mention Faceless Haven before the ban was also a big one from Kaldheim. So incredibly powerful lands that could turn into creatures were a thing already. They were just kind of all over. And they were very good. And they were kind of ubiquitous to the point where if you're running like a 1 or 2 color deck, you just put them in. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, is this a control deck? You want them as a way to finish the game out, potentially. Is this an aggro deck? If you get hit by the wipe, you want to have some threats back online. If you, are in a mid-range deck, maybe you've got some mana to sink into it, and you can chip in a little bit more damage. Sure, why not? They give you a ton of versatility, and you get value out of your lands, which, in the late game, run the risk of just being dead weight on the board. So there's definitely value to be had there. Well, we now have a new one coming back into standard, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the only creature land that we are aware of so far that will be available in standard. And that is Mishra's Foundry. So it is a land with no type. Tap to add one colorless. It enters the battlefield untapped. Pay 2, Mishra's Foundry becomes a 2/2 assembly worker artifact creature until end of turn. It's still a land. Or you can pay 1 tap, target attacking assembly worker gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So if you get multiple Mishra's Foundries down, they can buff each other. That's kind of neat. Not amazing, but that's actually something that we've seen from, I believe, Mishra's Factory in the past. There was a similar ability. So that's not uncommon. Actually, Blinkmoth Nexus, I believe, did the same thing. So that's not new to Magic. It's a fine ability. That way they're decent in multiples. So, all right, cool. Yeah, I think this card, outside of decks that are running 3 or more colors, because in those situations, having a land that doesn't produce mana, it doesn't produce colored mana, could be a real problem. Like, that could be an issue. It's going to make it tough to cast your early spells. However, in decks that are like 1 or 2 colors, especially like those aggro decks or control decks, all of a sudden, you got a new tool. Like, this is a great tool in those decks. Not to mention also, with cards like Liliana of the Veil running around right now, Liliana of the Veil's down tick is a very powerful effect that your opponent can hit on turn 3 because, and the reason it's so powerful is because it can hit on turn 3. You know, target player sacrifices a creature. If you do not have a creature online, or if you only have one creature online, I should say, then all of a sudden that creature's just dead. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter how badly you need it, doesn't matter if it's your only ramp piece or if it's the 3-drop that you were really hoping to combo off with next turn, doesn't matter, thing's freaking gone. Now, if you have Mishra's Foundry and one other untapped land, you can activate Mishra's Foundry, turn it into a 2/2 assembly worker. Now note, you can tap Mishra's Foundry and use that mana to animate itself. Now it will come into play or it will become a creature as a tapped 2/2 assembly worker. But if you're sacrificing it to a Liliana trigger, you don't care. So that's, so then you can sacrifice one of your lands then instead of your one creature, which then may be able to attack Liliana and kill her next turn. So there's some play with creature lands in really cool ways that you can take advantage of there. And edict style effects are one way to really lean into that. It's also, we're also out of the habit of checking our opponent's lands for damage. At least I am. So, it's when doing combat math, it's easy to forget about the land creatures. So getting those back in the mix can give you an edge. All in all, I think Mishra's Foundry is actually a pretty powerful card. I think it's going to see some play. The main reason it's inexpensive. It's very inexpensive to activate, and again, if you have power stones, like those power stones from either Karn Living Legacy or the Mightstone and Weakstone, that mana can be used to activate Mishra's Foundry. So that's real. Like, I think that's gonna be legit. So this card's just solid. It's just a solid role player. If you're in a heavy artifact deck that's mostly colorless, this is a shoe-in. Just put it in. If you're in a deck that's running 1, maybe 2 colors, and you have, and you have a lot of other good duels and maybe even tri-lands if you're in 3 colors, or like if you're splashing for something, it's still probably worth considering as like a 1 or 2 of. Like, it's just solid. Yeah, rock solid. All right, and the last card that we're going to talk about today is Recruitment Officer. First impression, I think this card's awesome. It is a 2/1 human soldier for 1 white. Frankly, if it was a vanilla and that was all it was, I'd say it was fantastic. Because you give me a Savannah Lions in 2 relevant aggro creature types, let's go. That's all I need. And we've got that and then some. We've talked a lot about activated abilities today. That has been the name of the game with the Brothers War spoilers so far, and Recruitment Officer kind of rounds it out with an ability: pay 3 and a white, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is a 2/1 for 1 human soldier with the ability to pay 4 and effectively draw a card with selection if you're in an aggro deck that's running cheap creatures. I think that's fantastic. I think the white decks or the Boros decks or the Selesnya decks that are going to be running this card are going to have a ton of hits for that ability, an absolute ton of them. And being able to activate that even on your opponent's end step or when you draw a land, when you are, empty-handed, being able to just keep churning through your deck is a big deal. One of the biggest problems or one of the biggest challenges that low to the ground aggro decks run into is running out of gas. That's something that if you've ever played in those decks, it's like, all right, well, if this board survives, okay, I can survive if I swing, get another swing, or if I top deck removal, my hand's empty, what I've got on the board is what I've got. Well, the Recruitment Officer gives you a way to leverage the mana that you've been playing throughout the game to help refill your hand and keep you mobilizing additional threats so you can play through your opponent's removal, potentially board wipes, that kind of thing, by just restocking your hand. I think Recruitment Officer is absolutely fantastic. And Soldier Tribal is something that it's an interesting archetype because in Dominaria United we got a phenomenal Soldier Lord, but soldiers are not that well represented right now in Standard specifically. There are a handful of pretty good soldiers. I know Thalia is a soldier. Okay, yeah, she's great. And there are a number of other options, but there isn't really a good 1-drop soldier. I think Gavany Trapper is the only one we have right now who's fine. He's a 0/2 for 1 with the ability to pay 2 tap and tap something down that you're tap down one of your opponent's creatures. It's fine. Like, you can do stuff with that, but it's not great. I think Recruitment Officer fills that role much, much, much better. There are also a lot of mono white aggro decks that don't necessarily care about human or soldiers that are currently running Hotshot mechanic. That is a card you see a lot, and the only reason they're running it, like, there isn't a vehicle to be seen in the whole frickin' deck, but it's a 2/1 for 1. That's the only reason they're running it. Recruitment Officer takes that spot day one immediately, no question, because you get the exact stat line, you get everything you play Hotshot Mechanic for, and you get a relevant ability that can help you in the late game. What's not to love? I think this card is actually just a really solid uncommon, great role player. We are going to see this thing see play. So yeah, so that has been the spoilers that we have so far for Brothers War. True spoiler season doesn't start for a number of weeks yet, so we are going to see more as in the coming weeks. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this set. I think it's very interesting. There's still plenty of stuff in Dominaria that we haven't figured out yet, or that I haven't fully, gotten a chance to play with. But at the end of the day, Modern Magic, we're always looking forward to the next thing. And, well, yeah, I'm looking forward to the next thing. This is going to be fun. Brothers War looks sweet. I'm really looking forward to it. Also, the lands look gorgeous. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but just, if you haven't seen the full art lands, go check them out. They're fantastic. They all show gigantic robot kaiju. And that doesn't tell you on it, I don't know what can. In any event, so that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for tuning into this video and for making it to the end. It means the world. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this, if you found this insightful, or you enjoyed just my particular style of rambling, please hit that subscribe button. I do these a couple times a week here on the channel. Whenever something comes to mind, I also do fun deck techs, and I also stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/hamhawks42. Again, huge thank you to magicjank for supporting the stream, magicjank.com for all of your Magic card needs, buying or selling. Check them out. They do phenomenal work. I appreciate you, and I'll catch you on the next one.